Hello again. So what I'm going to go over today is something it's called the Krabbe Newborn Screening Council. And I would say for those of you who haven't been involved with Krabbe screening, you basically saw a pretty darn good example of how the council works just a few minutes ago. So most of the people that were here and many more are on these calls. It's a once a month call. Um, and you know, just to kind of go over a little bit of background and talk about this group and how we got to where we are. So as you heard, we started screening in 2006. And, right now we look back and we say, wow, that was terrible screening, right? And we kind of knew it. We were getting into this. We didn't, whenever you pave the way, things don't go as well as you expect. There's too many false positives. We were doing DNA second tier testing, which at the time actually was state of the art and was best you could do. But we learned a lot. And what we learned is a lot about variants that can affect how enzyme activity is when you do a screening test. And in those days, when New York's first got started, we were running one enzyme, and one enzyme alone is really difficult to make interpretations for. And when I think as time went on, we were able to add other enzymes and other things that improved things. But this just ended up the big bottom line was creating these patients in waiting, and the patients in waiting problem doesn't quite go away when you start looking at when you throw in this late onset category. So I will remind people that the 2 to 10 is going to create patients in waiting. And I feel like the closer you are to 2, the longer you're going to wait. And the closer you are to 10, the less you're going to wait. And the perfect examples, what Joanne's twins were 8 cytosines. That's a very unusual range. 5 to 10 is a really unusual range for cytosine. 2 to 4, pretty normal. So you're going to, for those in the States, when you get into this, you're going to see. And this is the kind of thing that the Krabbe Council will talk about. So the main point of this talk is if you're not involved in this talk, in this group, that you should be, because you're going to be able to learn a lot and take away a lot. So Dieter went through kind of a history, but this all, started really with cytosine in 2013. So we knew about cytosine in 2013. And actually, very early on, somebody came up to me and said, cytosine is another substrate. You should be able to do that. And everybody thought, oh, cytosine isn't going to be in blood. You're not going to be able to test it. So, well, never listen to people say never. And then you test it and you find out you can test and find it. Well, then there were several papers afterwards that really refined this, all the way to the 2020 Gunzel paper here, which really looked at lots of patients and helped nail down how this would work. And then there was this Achieving Congruence paper, which Mike Gelb's lab led, but it came down to there were several of us labs trying to match our results. We couldn't get them to match. And the answer was like, well, what would an analytical chemist do? Create calibrators. So Mike's lab created calibrators, and now everybody gets to use those. So when we're talking about these numbers, we can compare all apples to apples when we're on these council phone calls. And then Dr. Stone and Joanne Kurtzberg led a group for consensus recommendations on what we do when we develop or we find individuals as cytosine that's 2 or 4 or 10. And, how do we handle that? And that's a lot about what this group talks about. So just to reiterate some things, individuals with early infantile or infantile KD with cytosines of 10 or above. And I would dare say if you got on a phone call and told us 8 or above, we'd probably be saying, treat that like a 10 or above, but this is the idea. You're going to get those people into therapy or at least be seeing the appropriate physician rather rapidly. The 2 to 9.9, and I'm going to say more like the 2 to 5 is where we start to really wonder about, well, what is this going to mean? How closely should they be watched? And the unaffected is under 2. So these are the recommendations that came out of that paper. But the council is a place, this Krabbe Council is a place where you can come and discuss these. So if there's uncertainty with you or your physicians, you can invite them on the phone call so that they can hear what this group thinks. And it's not just, they don't have to be able to read all this information and get it on their own. And Dr. Kurtzberg talks with the families a lot. Other people in these calls have talked with the families a lot. So there's messaging that can actually be very helpful, I think, in how to work with families, because it's really important that you get the proper message so that you're not scaring them out and scaring them too much, or not appropriately getting them there in a hurry like you should. So that's what I like to think this helps with the nuances of the interpretation. So I pretty much talk about this, but again, we're looking at, is it high risk pathway or a low risk pathway? And this is with looking at late onset disorders. You know, when we've got a baby that's somewhere between 2 and 10, we're going to be talking about, well, what was the Gal-C enzyme activity in leukocytes? Where was the cytosine? What was the genotype? We've got a history of information to look at, and we can all kind of come to a consensus on how that should be handled. And that's a big part of I think the most important part of our phone calls. The group was created in 2020, and in a large part, it was to help with this. And I think it's going to be even more useful as new states come in to do this. The meetings are held, as I said, monthly. It's a Zoom meeting. If you're not involved or you want to be involved, just email Anna and she'll get you on the list. And for, again, all are welcome. It doesn't have to just be the lab. It can be any physicians that are in your state that are also seeing these patients, or on a one-time basis where you have a case and you want to have the group discuss it with your physicians present. That's all of this is stuff that can be accommodated. And so what, the goals being case reviews and providing the guidance on the follow-up for these babies. So that's the group. I hope I've given you an idea of what we can do. And are there any questions?